Anna stepped into the ballroom and instantly the air changed. Not because of her presence, but because of its absence. No one turned, no one gasped, no one said, "Oh my God, is that Anna Dorsey?" Instead, the laughter rolled on, loud, polished, and indifferent. Champagne glasses clinked. A jazz trio played softly in the corner. Everyone was lit up in glitter and gold. But Anna, she moved like a shadow between spotlights. She paused for a moment, scanning for any familiar face. But it was all curated smiles, old cliques reunited, hands waving across the room like they still mattered. No one noticed her. No one cared to. 20 years ago, she'd been class president, debate team captain, and the girl who stayed late after orchestra rehearsals to pack chairs. Now she might as well have been invisible. She adjusted the hem of her simple navy dress, breathed once, then walked in. No red carpet, no reunion hug, no seat with her name on it. Just a woman back in a room that had already voted to forget her. Everywhere she looked, there he was, Bryce Dorsey, the golden boy, Harvard grad, venture capitalist, her younger brother. His face smiled down from banners near the bar, from framed portraits on the alumni wall, from the slideshow looping above the dessert table. There was even a banner with bold white letters, Bryce Dorsey, valedictorian, Harvard class of 2009. People clustered around his photos, drinks in hand, voices glowing with admiration. Such a bright future. He's doing so well. And of course, his parents must be so proud. But there was no photo of Anna, not one. No mention of her name, no old class picture, no chair reserved, no "Welcome back, Anna," not even a nod. It was as if she'd never existed. She looked at the wall where her own photo should have been, senior class president, orchestra chair, model UN delegate. But that space had been filled with a photo of Bryce again. They hadn't forgotten her. They had replaced her. And standing there in that sea of admiration and erasure, Anna Dorsey realized she wasn't just invisible, she was unwanted history. Anna approached slowly, not cautiously, not nervously, just quietly, like someone stepping back into a house that no longer smells like home. Her mother spotted her first. Champagne glass in hand, she turned, eyebrows lifted only slightly. Then came the words. Casual, measured, laced with distance. "Oh, you came?" That was it. No warmth, no hug, no "you look beautiful." Just 4 syllables delivered like an inconvenience. Anna tried to smile, but her lips didn't quite obey. She turned to her father. He glanced at her once, then looked right past her like she was part of the carpet. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment. It was worse. It was the absence of recognition. Like she had become a stranger at her own reunion. Like her parents had spent years convincing themselves she didn't belong. And now they believed it. She stood there stiff in her navy dress, heart pounding softly in her throat, as her mother turned back to the group of women beside her and laughed at something else, already moved on. And Anna stood alone, present but erased. It was near the dessert table when Melissa Young found her. Same Melissa from debate club, model UN, and yearbook committee, except now her eyes held something different, something heavy. "Anna," she said, voice low, "I think you should see this." She handed over her phone, the screen already open to an old email. Anna's breath caught. The subject line read, "R.E. Removal Request Anna Dorsey." The sender, her own father, sent 15 years ago to the Jefferson High Alumni Committee. She read the message silently, her hands suddenly cold. "Given Anna's decision to pursue non-traditional employment, we feel her inclusion in the alumni honor roll may misrepresent our family's values and public image. Kindly remove her name from any future recognitions. Thank you for understanding." Anna blinked. Once. Twice. She wasn't just forgotten. She was removed. By her own blood. She felt her knees weaken slightly, but she stood still. Because training teaches you not to collapse under fire. But nothing in war prepares you for this kind of betrayal. Anna hadn't yet finished processing the first email when Melissa swiped again. "There's more," she whispered. Another screen. Another betrayal. This time, the sender wasn't her father. It was her mother. The email was addressed to the Medal of Honor nomination board. Date stamped, official, clinical, cold. "Anna Dorsey has expressed a strong desire for anonymity. Please withdraw her nomination from consideration. She prefers to remain unrecognized for personal reasons." Anna's hands tightened around the phone, her jaw locked. She had never said those words. She had never asked for silence. She had never declined the nomination. In fact, when her commanding officer first told her about it, she'd cried, alone, in a tent, under a sky without stars. And now, the one woman who should have shouted her name to the world had stolen that moment, silently, strategically, forever. This wasn't just shame. It was erasure, dressed up as humility. Anna stared at the phone like it had just detonated in her hand. Not violently, not loudly, but with the cold, clinical precision of someone who knew exactly what they were erasing. The words weren't just painful. They were precise, polite, professionally written, and that made them even crueler. These weren't the hateful rants of angry parents. They were carefully composed character assassinations, crafted not to hurt her directly, but to make sure no one else ever saw her at all. By the time Anna looked up from the screen, she wasn't crying. She wasn't even angry. She was shocked into silence. She finally saw the truth. They hadn't simply forgotten her. They had rewritten her. Not by accident, not because of time, but by design. This was legacy engineering, and Anna was the part they cut out to keep the rest polished. She was no longer their daughter. She was a liability, a contradiction to their carefully curated image. And what hurt most was realizing they were okay with that. The microphone crackled, the music faded, and the MC stepped up, grinning glass in hand, eyes scanning the room like he was auditioning for late-night TV. "Let's raise a glass to the stars of Jefferson High, class of 2003. We've got doctors, CEOs, and even a senator in the room tonight." Laughter, claps, cheers. Then he leaned forward with that performative wink. "And hey, did anyone here ever become a general?" A few chuckles. But then her father's voice, sharp, loud, meant to carry. "If my daughter's a general, then I'm a ballerina." Boom. The room erupted. Laughter pealed through the chandeliers like rolling thunder. Someone choked on their wine. Even the DJ smiled behind the booth. Anna didn't move. She didn't blink. She just stared straight ahead, heart still, hands clenched under the tablecloth. She wasn't shocked. She was numb. Because this wasn't the first time her father used her as a punchline, but it was the first time he had an audience this big, and no one stopped him. The laughter was still echoing when her mother joined in, not with a roar, not with a cackle, just a small sip of wine and a line that sliced cleaner than any blade. "She's probably still on some base, peeling potatoes." The table erupted again. One woman clapped her hand over her mouth, laughing too hard to breathe. Another leaned in and added, "Or running laundry in the desert, right?" Her mother smiled. Not out of cruelty. Worse, out of comfort. Like the joke had been told before, many times. Anna didn't react. She couldn't, because the wound wasn't fresh. It was a scar they'd kept reopening for years. But this time, it wasn't whispered behind closed doors. It was served chilled with Chardonnay, in front of 200 people. Her hands were trembling beneath the table, but her face remained still, trained, disciplined, blank. And in that moment, she didn't just feel insulted. She felt small, disposable, unseen. The laughter roared on. It bounced off crystal glasses, echoed under the chandeliers, and spilled into the corners of the ballroom like smoke. But no one looked at her. No one said, "That's enough." No one corrected the record. No one defended her. Even Melissa, seated just 2 tables away, lowered her gaze, pretending to scroll through her phone as if silence could make the moment disappear. Anna sat perfectly still, like she was back in basic training, back in the desert, back in those long hours where pain had to be swallowed and tears weren't allowed. Her body didn't flinch, but inside, something cracked. This wasn't just embarrassment. This was public burial, while still breathing. They laughed at a version of her that never existed, a punchline they invented. And the worst part? The room agreed. Not because they hated her, but because it was easier to forget her than to face the truth. The ballroom still buzzed with laughter as Anna slipped away. Down the corridor, past the catering carts, past the gold-trimmed mirrors that didn't reflect who she'd become. She reached her suite, locked the door behind her. Silence at last. Then her phone vibrated. A message appeared on the secure line. Merlin status update. Threat level 3 requesting eyes. She exhaled sharp and controlled. She walked to the closet, pushed aside the navy dress bag, and pulled out a black case. Fingerprint scan. Voice ID. Retinal confirmation. Click. The lid hissed open. Inside, a foldable encrypted operations panel. Military-grade interface. A battlefield in code. Lines of digital activity streamed across the screen. Breach vectors, embedded signals, movement across international networks. This wasn't theoretical. This wasn't training. This was real. This was live. This was war. And in that room above the ballroom that tried to forget her, Anna Dorsey sat quietly, holding the world in her hands. Anna reached under the false panel of the case, pulled out the fabric, folded with care. Tucked away like a sacred truth no one else was allowed to hold, her dress blues, the uniform she hadn't worn in over a year, but not because she wasn't proud, because sometimes being visible felt dangerous, sometimes silence felt safer. She laid the uniform on the bed. The single silver star caught the light, a quiet glint, sharp, dignified, defiant. She hadn't craved attention. She didn't ask for ceremonies. She didn't announce her promotions on social media. She just served. With excellence, with honor. And they took her silence as weakness, as surrender, as permission to write her out of the story. They mistook humility for invisibility. Anna sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the uniform like it could speak. It didn't need to. The star already had. Anna sat still, staring at the star on her uniform, not because she needed reassurance, but because it was finally time to stop hiding behind silence. Her silence hadn't protected her. It had made her invisible, and worse, it had made her complicit. Every time she let their version of the story stand, every time she chose not to correct the lie, she had given them space to rewrite her. She thought she was choosing peace, but what she'd really chosen was erasure dressed as dignity. And now, something in her shifted. They weren't going to break her, because they never actually knew her to begin with. But tonight, they were going to meet the real Anna Dorsey. The one who didn't need their permission to exist. The one who'd led missions across continents, held entire networks together with intel and instinct, and still managed to keep her name out of the news. But not anymore. She stood crisp and calm, opened the encrypted comm, typed 5 simple words. Activate extraction. Clearance Dorsey 1. Because truth doesn't whisper forever. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a landing. The lights flickered. The floor shook. And then the sound. A low, rising roar. Not music, not laughter. Rotor blades. The unmistakable thump, thump, thump of a military helicopter slicing through the night sky. Inside the ballroom, glasses rattled, napkins fluttered, conversations died mid-sentence. People turned toward the windows, unsure whether to gasp or grab their phones. Outside, the air swirled like a storm was landing, and then it did. A matte black helicopter descended onto the south lawn, its floodlights sweeping across the glass like searchlights from a war film. Wind tore through the flower arrangements. The chandeliers trembled. Two uniformed figures emerged from the shadows. Not ushers, not performers, not part of any reunion skit. Real soldiers, real purpose, real rank. Their boots struck the marble in perfect unison. Click, click, click. The room froze. Phones went up. Voices dropped. And somewhere deep in the crowd, Anna Dorsey stood. The taller of the two soldiers scanned the room. His posture was perfect. Shoulders squared, chin up, eyes sharp as steel. He walked straight past the rows of alumni in glittering gowns and designer tuxedos, past the CEO tables, past the senator, past Bryce Dorsey. Every step deliberate, every footfall loud enough to silence 1,000 whispers. He stopped, exactly 3 feet in front of her, saluted. "Lieutenant General Dorsey, ma'am, the Pentagon requires your immediate presence." A gasp swept through the ballroom like wind through broken glass. Her father's wine glass slipped. Her mother's lips parted, no sound came out. Bryce stared, jaw unhinged, like he'd forgotten how blinking worked. The MC froze mid-sentence, mic still in hand. No one moved. The woman at table 14, the one they ignored, erased, humiliated, was a 3-star general. And she didn't flinch. No one moved. Not a single glass clinked. Not a fork scraped a plate. Even the chandeliers stopped swaying, as if the room itself held its breath. The MC slowly lowered his mic, eyes wide, mouth open, silent. Anna stood tall, steel in her spine, stillness in her breath. Then a woman stepped forward, short red hair, a press badge on her collar. She held a piece of paper in one trembling hand. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice shook. "I've just received this from the Jefferson High Board via anonymous release." She cleared her throat. "Read it aloud. Email dated March 12, 2010, from dorsey.family.office@privatemail.com. Subject, legacy clarification. To whom it may concern, we respectfully request the removal of Anna Dorsey from any alumni honors or legacy walls. Her career path diverges from the image our family seeks to uphold." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Gasps turned to murmurs. Murmurs turned to judgment. All eyes now pointed to her parents. But it wasn't Anna on trial anymore. It was them. Anna turned, not toward the crowd, not toward the cameras, but directly toward them. Her mother pale and frozen, her father lips pressed tight, eyes begging for words he didn't earn the right to say. Anna looked at them fully, finally. "You don't get to speak anymore. Not about me, not for me, not ever again." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The room was already holding its breath for her. She didn't wait for a response. No apology, no stuttered excuse, no fake tears. She didn't need closure. She needed distance. And so she walked past them, past their silence, past their shame, past the legacy they tried to edit without her. She didn't look back, because the people who erased you don't deserve to witness your return. The ballroom doors blew open. Wind surged in like a tidal wave. Napkins flew, hair whipped. And Anna Dorsey walked head high, back straight through the chaos. Her dress billowed like a flag. The floodlights from the chopper caught in her hair, turning it into strands of fire against the night sky. She didn't run. She didn't rush. She moved like destiny had just knocked, and she answered. The rotors pounded harder now, like a war drum calling her home. Guests stepped aside, shoulders brushing, mouths parting in disbelief. "She's a general. That's the daughter. They lied. Why would they lie about her?" Whispers erupted like wildfire, but Anna didn't react, because her whole life had prepared her for this walk, for the day she would rise in front of the very people who buried her. She reached the chopper, paused for one breath, and climbed in, hair flying, face calm, truth intact. As the helicopter lifted from the lawn, the world below shrank into lights and murmurs. But in that moment, it wasn't about medals anymore. It wasn't about rank or reputation, not about proving anything. It was about truth, undeniable, irreversible truth. Anna didn't need to make a speech, didn't need to correct anyone. She let the rotors do the talking. She let the silence they left behind tell the story. Because now, her presence was enough to dismantle the lie, and the title, Lieutenant General, no longer felt like a badge of honor. It felt like a witness statement. A quiet declaration, they tried to erase me, but I remained. And in that silence behind her, among the clinking glasses and fake smiles turned cold, the people who once laughed finally understood. Not because she convinced them, but because truth, when it lands, leaves no room for denial. The White House lawn was silent, not the silence of awkwardness, but the reverent quiet reserved for moments that matter. Uniformed officers stood in formation. Reporters lined the perimeter. The president stood at the podium, notes in hand, gravity in his voice. And in front of them all, Anna Dorsey. She stood tall in full dress blues, polished metals, star gleaming, composure carved from steel. The president spoke of valor, of sacrifice, of missions unseen, of a woman who served with distinction, who didn't chase recognition, but became the standard for it. And when he placed the Medal of Honor around her neck, Anna didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply stood still, steady, sovereign. Her eyes never once searched for her parents in the crowd. She didn't need to, because this wasn't for them. It never had been. Weeks later, she returned, not to a battlefield, not to a press conference, but to a quiet hallway tucked inside Jefferson High, the Hall of Legacy. Polished floors, dim lighting, plaques lining the walls etched in gold, silver, even marble. But hers was bronze. No spotlight, no dramatic unveiling. Just a janitor stepping aside as she approached the wall. There it was. Anna Dorsey led in silence, served with honor. She didn't cry, didn't linger. She simply nodded. Because this wasn't about recognition anymore. It was about restoration, about returning what had been taken, not for applause, but for accuracy. Because when history tries to erase you, sometimes all you need is a line in bronze that no one can wipe away again. She was about to leave the hallway when she heard soft footsteps behind her. Anna turned slightly. A young woman, barely 20, stood there in full cadet uniform, freckles on her cheeks, eyes wide with both nerves and something else, reverence. She cleared her throat. "Ma'am?" she said, voice trembling. "You're the reason I enlisted." Anna froze for half a second, and then she nodded, once. No smile, no dramatic hug, no monologue about purpose or legacy. Just a quiet exchange between two soldiers, one just beginning, and one who had already walked through the fire. The girl didn't ask for a photo. She didn't need proof. She had already found her reason. And Anna, she didn't need to say a word, because in that moment, she knew she was no longer invisible. She was unforgettable. You don't need their permission to be who you already are. Sometimes the people who should have protected you are the very ones who tried to erase you. Not always with violence, but with silence, with cold shoulders, with missing photos, with carefully chosen words that rewrite your worth. But here's the truth. No one gets to define you but you. Recognition doesn't always come from the people you love, and sometimes that's the point. You weren't made to fit their narrative. You were made to live your truth. So walk forward, even when no one claps, even when they whisper, even when they pretend you were never there. Because one day, the world will hear the sound of your footsteps, and it will turn to listen. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or erased, then this channel is for you. Subscribe to Through Her Eyes for more true, powerful stories about women who didn't just survive.
They rewrote history in silence, strength, and truth, because sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest legacy.